Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to our series exploring Sheikh ElSahrawy's profound reflections on the Holy Quran. I'm Yusuf.
And I'm Miriam. Wa alaikum salam. Today we delve into a fascinating passage from Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 238 to 245. It begins with a powerful command: take care to do your prayers, praying in the best way, and stand before God in devotion. If you are in danger, pray when you are out walking or riding. When you are safe again, remember God, for He has taught you what you did not know.
It's a profound start. But Miriam, what's particularly striking is that the very next verse in the reflection returns to the topic of family, specifically the widowed woman. It feels like a sudden interruption.
It is, and it's a deliberate one. Sheikh ElSahrawy points out that God the Most High will be returning to the matter of the family, saying, "And those who are taken in death among you and leave wives behind, for their wives is a bequest, maintenance for 1 year without turning them out of the dead husband's home. But if they leave of their own accord, then there is no blame upon you for what they do with themselves in an acceptable way. And God is exalted in might wise."
So by placing the verse about prayer right in the middle of a discussion about the separation of a husband and wife, what is God teaching us?
Sheikh ElSahrawy explains that the true Lord the Most High divided a single issue, the separation of a husband and wife, and placed the discussion of prayer between its two parts. This was to remind us of the oneness of the responsibilities of faith. Since the topic is about separation, either by divorce or by death, God wanted to place man in an act of worship that connects him directly to the one who placed the rulings for divorce, the rulings for prayer, and who destined death itself.
That makes sense. It anchors us during turbulent times. But why was prayer chosen specifically, and not another act of worship like fasting or charity, to interrupt this flow?
An excellent question. It is because prayer is what gives believers tranquility when the affairs of marriage and divorce become serious and worrisome. Whether it's the voluntary separation of divorce or the painful separation of death, nothing strengthens the heart like standing in prayer before the Lord. The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was the first to do this. When something became wearisome for him, he would rise to pray.
So the believer turns to the Creator for comfort.
Exactly. The believer goes to the Creator who granted the means of marriage and decreed divorce and separation, to ask him to lighten the worry and sadness. And since the believer has gone to the one who decrees all fate, he should know that God did not leave these situations without rulings to manage them. For every situation, there is an appropriate ruling. The believer's role is to accept the turns of fate with contentment, and then go to God in penitence, humility, and prayer, because divorce and death bring a shock of separation.
Let's look closer at the verse itself. God says, maintain with care the obligatory prayers, and in particular the middle prayer. What can we understand from this phrasing?
We can understand that the prayers being referred to are the 5 daily prayers. The question that arises then is, what is the middle prayer? The admonition here contains what we call a specification and a generalization. To understand this better, Sheikh ElSahrawy suggests we look at the supplication of Noah. Peace be upon him. He prayed for his Lord to grant forgiveness to him, to his parents, to everyone who enters his house as a believer, and to all believing men and believing women.
How does that example clarify the concept?
Well, think about how many times his parents are included in that prayer. They are mentioned specifically to him and to his parents. Then they are included generally in the phrase to everyone who enters his house, and they are included again in the even more general phrase to all believing men and believing women. They are included 3 times. So invoking a general thing after a specific thing means the specific will be included in the general, and there is repetition for the specific according to its level of importance.
And this same principle applies to the verse about prayer?
Precisely. God's words, maintain with care the obligatory prayers, and in particular the middle prayer, imply the same thing.
The command is to maintain, or hafadho. What is the full meaning of that word?
The word hafadh can mean to memorize, the opposite of to forget. It can also mean to save or keep, the opposite of to waste or lose. The 2 meanings are related. Someone who remembers something and then forgets it has lost it. Someone who saves money and then squanders it has also lost it. So, hafadh means to assure the continuation of something that is in your possession. If you memorize a verse of the Quran, you must save it within yourself. If God blesses you with wealth, you must look after it.
So when the verse says, maintain with care the obligatory prayers, what does it mean in that context?
It means, do not waste them. It could also mean that you have tasted the sweetness of prayer in the closeness of your Lord's company, and it is upon you to hold on to this. These words refer to the 5 daily prayers we are familiar with.
And the next part, and in particular, the middle prayer,
This mentions the specific after the general. It is as though God commanded us twice to be mindful of this specific prayer. Once when it was included in the general command for all prayers, and once again by making specific mention of it.
so why single out the middle prayer for this special emphasis? What is it?
The word for middle in Arabic, wasatha, is the feminine form of asath. They both mean something that lies equidistantly between two things, where the two sides are equal. For the 5 prayers, the two sides could not be equal in number unless the total was an odd number. Since it is the middle one out of 5, this means it is the 3rd prayer, with 2 prayers before it and 2 after it. This is if you consider the simple numerical order.
But are there other ways to determine which prayer is the middle one?
Yes, there are several interpretations. If we consider the order in which the prayers were made obligatory, the first was the al-dhuhr, or midday prayer. Then came al-asr, then al-maghrib, then al-isha, and finally al-fajr. If you take the middle prayer according to this order of prescription, it would be the sunset prayer, al-maghrib. This is the opinion of many scholars.
What about based on the number of cycles, the rek'ahs?
If we look at that, we find a prayer with 2 cycles, the dawn prayer. We have prayers with 4 cycles, midday, mid-afternoon, and night. And we have a prayer with 3 cycles, the sunset prayer. The middle one of these, lying between 2 and 4, is again the sunset prayer, maghrib.
And if we consider the passage of the day itself,
Then the dawn prayer is first, followed by midday, mid-afternoon, sunset, and night. This makes the mid-afternoon prayer, al-asr, the middle one.
Sheikh ElSahrawy seems to offer even more possibilities.
It does. If you consider it as the midpoint between the silent and loud prayers, it could be the dawn or the sunset prayers. The silent prayers are midday and mid-afternoon. The loud prayers are sunset, night, and dawn. Between night and midday comes the dawn prayer. Or it could be the sunset prayer, since it comes between the midday and mid-afternoon prayers on one side and the night and dawn prayers on the other.
And one more interpretation is mentioned regarding the angels.
Yes, if we consider it according to the times when the angels gather, which is at the ends of the day and at night, it is either the mid-afternoon or the dawn prayer. So, the middle position can be determined from whatever point of view you take, and each has its own reasoning. The exact identity is left obscure.
Which leads to the most important question, why did God conceal its identity from us?
The reflection says that he concealed it so that we recognize the difference between something being clearly identified and it being concealed in the midst of other things. When it is concealed, they all might be it. This leads to us being mindful of all the prayers. As long as the middle prayer could be al-fajr, al-dhuhr, al-asr, al-maghrib, or al-isha, this is all the more reason to be mindful of all of them. The ambiguity serves to widen its relevance.
Is there a parallel to this in our faith?
Yes, God the Most High made the exact date of Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, vague for the very same reason. So, instead of there being only one night of power to focus on, there are several potential nights. It is the same with this verse. The command is to maintain the 5 prayers in general, and each individual one of them specifically.
The verse continues, and stand up full of devotion towards God. What can you tell us about this word, klunut, or devotion?
The word klunut is derived from a root meaning doing something constantly. The Noble Quran urges us to be constant in obedience to God with humility and submission. We see a form of this word, qantan, in another verse where God describes the worshipper who devoutly worships throughout the night, prostrating or standing, mindful of the life to come, and hoping for his Lord's mercy. God then asks the rhetorical question of whether those who know and those who do not know can be equal. Only those with insight keep this in mind.
So God is asking us to compare 2 types of people.
Yes, he commands his messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, to tell us to compare the one who humbles himself before God all night, hoping for his mercy, with the one who calls on his Lord only in times of trouble and forgets him in times of ease. Are those who know the rights of God and obey him equal to those who do not know, and who neglect to see the signs of God's power?
The next verse then addresses prayer in a very specific and dangerous situation. It says, and if you fear an enemy, then pray on foot or riding.
This shows that the way to remember God is to renew one's connection with him in prayer. We are commanded to perform the prayer even in the midst of battle, which is why God established the prayer of fear for us. Fighting takes one away from his security. So even in the midst of danger, we must not forget God, because that is when we are most in need of him. We should not take the occasion which most befits us to be with God and make it an excuse for forgetting him.
Sheikh ElSahrawy draws a parallel here to another situation.
It does, with the ill person. As long as a person is ill, he is in the company of God. So it is not fitting that he abstains from praying. No one is excused, not even the ill person. If he cannot pray standing, he prays sitting. If he cannot pray sitting, he prays lying down. This continues even if he is forced to pray only by making motions with his eyes. Likewise, if you fear an enemy, you pray whilst walking or while riding.
The verse uses the word rijal for those on foot.
Yes, rijal is the plural of rajid, which means to walk on one's feet. This same word is used in another verse, where God commands his messenger to proclaim the pilgrimage, and people will come to him rijalan on foot and riding on mounts. People used to perform the pilgrimage on foot or on camels. So rajid is someone who travels on foot. The meaning here is that prayer is obligatory for believers, whether they are traveling on foot or riding.
How is this prayer of fear actually performed?
The true Lord, the Most High, legislated by dividing the believers into two groups. One group prayed with the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in the first rak'ah, and then completed the prayer on their own. The second group then came to be led by the messenger in the following cycle. The messenger would finish, wait for them to finish, and then give the greeting of peace with them to end the prayer. The first group had the blessing of beginning the prayer with him, and the second group had the blessing of finishing it with him. This was employed at the Battle of Dhat ar-Riqa, with each group guarding the other while they prayed.
Sheikh ElSahrawy offers a specific opinion on this matter.
He does. He says that he has an opinion that the prayer of fear, as described by the jurists, was only for those battles in which the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was present. This is because there could not be some troops who prayed behind the Prophet, while others were denied this. So God apportioned the blessing of praying with him to both groups. But after the Prophet passed on, it was possible for those facing the enemy to have one imam, or prayer leader, and the other group to have another imam. So the dividing of the prayer behind a single imam was only because that imam was the highest imam. Peace and blessings be upon him.
So, what is the core takeaway from the verse? And if you fear an enemy, then pray on foot or riding?
From these words, we understand that one is not exempted from prayer even when facing the enemy in battle. When the time for prayer comes, the believer must pray if he can. If he cannot, he must say, God is great twice. The verse then concludes, then remember God in prayer, as he has taught you that which you did not previously know. That is, remember that God taught you things you did not know. If he had not taught you, what would you have done?
And after this deep dive into prayer, the text, as you mentioned at the beginning, returns to the widowed woman.
Yes, the true Lord the Most High returns to speaking about her, saying, if any of you die and leave widows, make a bequest for them, a year's maintenance and no expulsion from their homes for that time. But if they leave of their own accord, you will not be blamed for what they may reasonably choose to do with themselves. God is almighty and wise.
But a previous verse, 234, already gave a ruling for widows. How do these two rulings work together?
That's the key point. The previous verse stated that widows shall wait 4 months and 10 days. So we have two rulings. One says they must undergo a waiting term of 4 months and 10 days. The other says that when the husband is near death, he should advise that his wife remain in his home for a whole year without being disturbed. The first 4 months and 10 days are obligatory. The rest of the year is optional. If she wants, she can take it. If not, she can do otherwise.
So the bequest for the full year comes from the husband?
Yes, the verse says, for their wives is a bequest. This bequest is from the husband when he is about to die. So the woman is between two rulings. One compulsory ruling to stay for 4 months and 10 days, and another where her husband bequeaths her the right to stay for a whole year, unless she decides to leave of her own accord. She has the choice to stay a full year or to leave after the obligatory period.
Sheikh ElSahrawy then moves to another category of women.
It does. The next verse says, divorced women shall also have such maintenance as is considered fair. This is a duty for those who are mindful of God. This means that all divorced women, under all circumstances, have the right to maintenance. God clarified in a previous verse that this maintenance is for each one if you have not settled on a dowry for them. If you have specified a dowry, she takes half of what was settled. It is as though God has made an appropriate ruling for every situation.
And after laying out all these detailed rulings, God concludes this section with a powerful statement.
He does. He says, in this way, God makes his revelations clear to you, so that you may grow in understanding. We know from what we've seen before, that signs or verses are amazing things. The reflection notes that if pure intelligence were to study the causes of these subjects, it would only arrive at the same ruling God has given.
And what happens when people stray from these rulings?
When people stray, Society is afflicted with the evil result of that infringement. It is as though God is confirming the wisdom of what he legislated. If no evil came from these infringements, people would say there was no need for the legislation. So, when we do not adhere to God's laws, logic dictates that bad things happen. If they didn't, people might say, "Lord, we did not adhere to your way, yet nothing bad happened to us." The bad things we find in society are there to alert us to the truth of God's teachings. In this way, those who contravene God's way are indirectly helping God's way.
After this, the discourse takes another significant turn, moving to a matter of faith and destiny.
It does. It moves to the principle that when God destines something, no creature can escape it. He says, "Prophet, consider those people who abandoned their homeland in fear of death, even though there were thousands of them. God said to them, 'Die,' and then brought them back to life again." God shows real favor to people, but most of them are ungrateful.
What is the context for this story? Why is it placed here?
After speaking about the Muslim family, God wanted the Islamic community to know that no one can escape his destiny. This community was entrusted to bear the message of heaven to earth until the end of time. It had to be educated in a way that matched this mission. God placed before this community the experiences of previous nations so they could take admonition from real events. He wanted to alert us to the basis of this issue, that he alone gives life, and the one who gives life is the one who takes it.
The reflection connects this story to a specific prophet and his people.
Yes, it presents this as an incident that Moses, peace be upon him, experienced with his people, the children of Israel. The story of Moses and his people is given the most space in the Quran because this was the community that caused much toil for messengers. It was necessary for God to present this matter completely to the community of Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. The verse says, "Did you not see those who left their homes in their thousands, fearing death?" The reason they left was fear of death.
But the cause of that feared death isn't specified.
It is not. Exegetes have said they may have been fleeing a plague or an enemy. But what is important is that they sought to flee from fear of death. The Quran deals with what mattered most. The specific reason for their flight is not important, because the Quran is not chronicling history. It doesn't specify where it happened, when it happened, or who was involved.
And there's a profound wisdom in that lack of detail.
Absolutely. The reflection warns that those who try to investigate these details are trying to link events to specific times, places, and people. But had the Quran wanted this, it would have done it. If those details were relevant to the lesson, God would have told us. By adding these details, you weaken the story's significance. Someone might say, that could happen back then, but not now. Or it could only happen in that place, or it only happened to those specific people.
So the ambiguity gives the story its power.
Exactly. When God makes the time, place, and characters ambiguous, he gives the story life in every age, in every place, and with all people. No one can say it is restricted to a specific setting. The example given is of people who try to determine the identity of the people of the cave and their dog. By specifying these things, you are not enriching the story, you are making it poorer.
But doesn't the Quran sometimes specify names and details?
It does, when it wants to. For example, God gives the example of Noah's wife and Lot's wife. He doesn't name them because what's important is that they were married to noble messengers, yet their husbands could not save them from their disbelief. The lesson is that choosing one's doctrine is up to each individual. He also gives the example of the wife of Pharaoh, again without naming her, because what's important is that she was the wife of a man who claimed to be a god, yet he could not convince her.
And when does God specify a name?
He specifies when the story is unique to one person. He says he puts forth as another example Mary, daughter of Omran, peace be upon her. He mentioned her in her father's name because the thing that happened to her will never be repeated for any other woman. So to those who try to strengthen a story by adding detail, the reflection says, you are making the story poorer.
Let's go back to the phrasing of the verse. It says, have you not considered, or as some translations put it, did you not see? The prophet and the believers didn't literally see this event. What is the significance of this?
That's a crucial point. When you ask someone, did you not see? It usually means with their eyes. But the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, and the believers who came after him, heard of this event, they did not see it. We know sight is with the eye, and hearing is with the ear. These are the senses through which the mind perceives. God says he brought us from our mother's wombs knowing nothing, but gave us hearing, sight, and minds.
So why use the word for seeing when the knowledge came through hearing?
The chief sense is the eye. You may hear something from someone, but when you see it for yourself, you have your own experience. As the saying goes, the one who sees is not like the one who hears. When God wanted to ask us, "Do you not know this story?" He phrased it as, "Did you not see?" to tell you that something which took place before you existed must be received in the same way you receive that which you have seen with your own eyes. For God, who created the senses, is more truthful than the senses.
Is there another example of this in the Quran?
Yes, God addresses the messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, with the question, "Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the army of the elephant?" We know the prophet was born in the year of the elephant and did not see this event. The meaning is, do you not know? Have you not heard it from me? He did not say, "Have you not heard?" to affirm that since the true Lord was telling him of it, it was as though he did see it with his own eyes. It is as if God is saying, "This matter is settled, and when I tell you of it, it is as though you have seen it."
The verse continues, God said to them, "Die." Then he restored them to life. What can we understand from this direct command?
When you issue an order, the one receiving it must have the power to carry it out. If you say to someone, "Die," will they die? If he causes himself to die, he has killed himself. There is a big difference between dying and killing oneself. Death comes without any participation from the one who dies, whereas killing might be caused by suicide or other means.
The Quran itself makes this distinction, doesn't it?
It does. God addresses the believers, saying that Muhammad is but a messenger, and other messengers have passed away before him. He then asks, if he dies or is killed, will they turn on their heels? This verse came after the defeat of Ahad, when a report spread that the prophet had been killed. It shows that the faith should not be shaken by the death of the messenger.
So death is tied directly to God's will.
Yes, the reflection clarifies that no human being can die except by God's leave. At a term preordained, death is tied to God's will and his setting of a term for every life. So the command "die" was not something they could choose to do. It was a matter of compulsion. They died by the omnipotent power of God, which is represented by the words "be" and "it is," and they came back to life by that same power. They had no say in their deaths, nor in their revivals.
This reminds me of the creation of the heavens and the earth.
It's the same principle. God addressed the sky and the earth and ordered them to come willingly or against their will, and they replied that they would come in obedience. These are matters of compulsion from the Creator. The command to die and the command to come back to life were commands of compulsion.
And the very thing they fled from is what they met.
Exactly. It was death they feared and ran from. But no one can evade the destiny of God. He wanted them to know that no one can flee from God's destiny without running straight into God's destiny. This is why when our master Umar bin al-Khattab, God be pleased with him, wanted to prevent people from going to a land with plague, they asked him, "Do you want to flee from God's destiny?" He replied, "Yes, we flee from God's destiny to God's destiny." The believer utilizes the means, but submits his affair to God.
Why did God bring them back to life, instead of leaving their reckoning for the day of resurrection?
He wanted to impart a lesson and an admonition, one that would remain before the eyes of all people, preserved in the noble Quran. He wanted to give an experience. They died by compulsion, returned to life by compulsion, lived out their destined lives, and then died again. The lesson remained for every true believer, so that he would not fear death in God's way.
The quote's a famous companion of the prophet here.
It does. By this experience, God wanted us to accept the struggle in his way. The words of Khalid bin al-Walid, God be pleased with him, on his deathbed are a powerful reminder. I witnessed 100 military advances, or thereabouts, and there is not a hand's span of my body, but it has been struck with a sword or pierced by a spear. Yet here I die, on my bed as a camel dies. May the eyes of cowards never sleep.
So life and death are not tied to fighting, but to God's will. How does the verse conclude?
It concludes, and God is full of bounty to the people, but most of the people do not show gratitude. Bounty is when you are given more than you need. God doesn't just give people what they need, but more. So if those people had died from plague, they would be martyrs, and that is a bounty. If they had died fighting their enemy, they would also have attained martyrdom, which is a bounty.
Why is that a bounty?
Because we will all die. If a person dies as a martyr in God's way, this is an additional gift. Yet most people are ungrateful because they do not know the extent of the blessing in the things God sends them. The true Lord only sends upon mankind what is good for them and what rectifies them.
So after this powerful lesson about destiny, the Quran issues a clear command.
Yes, after showing that no one can flee from destiny, the true Lord the Most High says, fight in God's cause and remember that He is all-hearing and all-knowing. This is a clear command to fight without fearing death, because the one who gives life and ordains its term is all-hearing of what the fighters say, and all-knowing of their intentions.
In the past, fighting was a great burden both physically and financially. How does Sheikh ElSahrawy address this?
It does. Every warrior had to equip himself, his mount and his weapon. If he was prepared to give up his life, he was all the more prepared to give up his wealth. Because of this, God moves from the matter of fighting with one's life to the matter of wealth, saying, "Who will give God a good loan, which he will increase for him many times over? It is God who withholds, and God who gives abundantly, and it is to him that you will return."
The phrase, "lend to God a goodly loan," is so powerful. What does it signify?
It is a tremendous matter. When you give a person a loan, it is as though you are giving God a loan. But when you spend in God's way, you give to the general spirit of religion, and your dealing is directly with God. By using the word loan or card, God alerts us that he is seeking an action that is not easy for the human soul. The word card literally means to gnaw at something with one's teeth. He knows it is difficult, and he rewards it according to this difficulty.
And what makes it a goodly loan?
A goodly loan has a few aspects. First, if you give a loan to one of God's servants, it is as though you have given a loan to God, because God is the one who took it upon himself to provide for that needy person. Second, the source of the wealth you loan must be lawful. This is why it was said of the woman who gave charity from money earned by prostitution, would that she had not prostituted herself and given no charity.
Sheikh ElSahrawy also says that the reward for a loan can be more than the reward for charity. Why is that?
It is because the sting of giving charity is a one-time thing. You give the money and give up hope of seeing it again. But you attach yourself to a loan, and every time you are patient for its repayment, this is another good deed to your account. Moreover, someone you give charity to might not truly be needy, but no one seeks a loan unless they are truly in need.
And how does this connect to the end of the verse? It is God who withholds and God who gives abundantly.
It fits perfectly. Lending money makes your own wealth appear to decrease, but God repays this loan with a manifold increase. The money you loan out appears to decrease, but God will increase it and repay it abundantly, many times over, according to his standards, not ours. And in the hereafter, the reward will be great.
Maryam, after exploring all of this, what stands out most from today's discussion?
For me, it's the profound wisdom in the structure of the Quran. The way God interrupts a discussion on family law with a command about prayer, and then follows it with a story about destiny, isn't random. It's a deliberate divine curriculum designed to build a believer's soul, reminding us that our connection to God is the anchor in every storm of life, whether it's personal loss or a collective struggle. And for you, Yusuf, what resonates most deeply?
It's the concept of ambiguity as a mercy. The idea that God concealed the identity of the middle prayer or the details of the ancient story, not to confuse us, but to widen the field of our devotion and contemplation. It teaches me that faith isn't about having every single detail pinned down, but about embracing the vastness of the lesson and applying it universally in our lives.
A beautiful reflection. May we all find the lessons meant for us in his words.
Amin. To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on The Divine Flow. Until next time, peace be with you.